Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm parent coach, mother of four, and your host, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where you will learn that even for parenting experts like me, there is no such thing as a perfect parent, and that fabulous behavior and amazing relationships are right on the other side of that realization. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the podcast. I am pumped to be here with you again. This week, talking about praise, the pitfalls of praise. So I'm here to tell everybody to stop saying nice stuff to their kids right away. Cut that out, everybody. Now we're going to talk about how to compliment and praise our kids in ways that are actually helpful. And yeah, the pitfalls of when we fall into, kind of maybe more traditional or common ways of showering our kids with compliments and positivity and stuff like that. And I can definitely say, in terms of a confession, like, I'm a human. I grew up around other humans in America. Like, I definitely am guilty of falling into these things. And I will also say that, this is something that I learned really, really early in my parenting. I don't know why. Actually, I think it was from Love and Logic, actually. If you actually read like the Parenting with Love and Logic book, or there's one that's like specifically for young children. I think that was the first Love and Logic book I read. And one of the things that was in that book was just, they didn't really like come right out and say, don't praise your kid, but they, would talk about like how powerful it would be to just observe and notice your child and not really offer an opinion on what you're observing. So I noticed you've been reading a lot lately versus like, I'm so proud of you for being such a great reader. Look at you. You're a bookworm. This is amazing. You should read every day. Like, I'm so impressed. Reading is the best, just noticing, hey, you're really into martial arts right now. Or I saw you spend 4 hours figuring out how to make a sling out of a shoelace today. That's an actual real example from just this week with my 11-year-old. So I learned this, sort of like got it into my head. And this is like one of the superpowers and weaknesses of the Ania type 1, which is what my type is that we can tend to take like, helpful little nuggets of advice or information and turn them into like really big blanket rules about everything. So that book only had to mention once about how powerful noticing and observations were with children for me to turn that into a never compliment your kid rule. But it did turn out that, like, as I did more of my own research and became more of an expert or a professional in the parenting world, that actually was borne out in a lot of the more current things that we are learning and espousing to our clients and things like that. And just total sidebar, but anybody, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to go ahead and guess that you like to listen to podcasts. And there's another podcast that I really love called Radio Lab. And they did an episode, I think maybe just a few weeks ago, that was all about self-esteem. It was fascinating. It was like almost like the history of how self-esteem like came to be even like a word that we know. It's so common now. We don't even realize that that's like a term that had to begin somewhere. And, how that influenced like the way that schools were run and classrooms were run and the different things that we did. And, when we were kids, all around self-esteem and everything. So highly recommend that episode. I think it probably would be a good complement to what we're talking about today with praise. But in terms of confession, I would say I've actually kind of softened. Well, I'm a 46-year-old woman who's been in therapy for like a million years. So I am right in that beautiful chapter of life where if you're doing your work, you soften and around lots and lots of things, but definitely have softened around this specific thing about praising kids and things like that. And I don't know if I think that's a good thing or not. It's just something that's naturally happened. But I find myself saying things like, I'm so proud of you, or whatever, in much more sort of like me centric ways than I did when my kids were younger. And it wasn't a conscious choice that I made. It's just something that's happened as I've started to like relax my rigid sort of do this, don't do that approach to my own parenting. So there you go. I'm going to make a confession for you today that I do not always follow this, what I'm about to teach you, but it doesn't mean I don't think it's true and real. It very much is. And so let's talk about this idea about praise. So, it could sound like kind of either totally new agey and hokey or just downright mean. But just think about this in terms of yourself. Like, have you ever received a compliment, but you didn't really believe it on the inside? Like someone is just like, oh my gosh, you look so great today. And on the inside, you're like, I don't know why you would say that. I look like a dumpster fire or whatever. Or someone compliments you about something that you have a really strong belief that you're not very good at. Like, I don't know, could be anything. I'm trying to put my own spin on it. Like, what's something I think I'm not very good at? Being quiet and not taking center stage, like standing back or something. If someone told me that I was really good at that, I would literally just be like, well, you obviously don't know me. So of course it happens. I think the answer to that question, have you ever received a compliment but didn't really believe it? Like it didn't penetrate. It never got further than skin deep for you. I think the answer for all of us is yes, of course. And the real truth is that external praise doesn't really change the way we feel about ourselves. So it makes perfect sense that we would start to examine whether it's actually a great tool to use in our parenting. Like, why would we ever think that praising and complimenting, raving about our kids and all, or if you're Jewish, maybe you use the Yiddish word kvelling about your kids, is going to improve their disposition or their self-esteem or their self-concept or their confidence. It makes perfect sense that that might not work and that it might merit us taking a deeper look at that. But, who could blame us for doing that, especially when kids have negative talk? When a kid puts themselves down, it would make perfect sense that our instinct is to leap in and replace that negative with a positive. Like, you're not dumb. You're the smartest kid I know. Or it's not true that you have no friends. You just had a play date yesterday. Or, look at all the people that come to your birthday party or whatever. But unfortunately, and if you have a kiddo like this who puts themselves down, I'm sure you've already told them amazing, beautiful, wonderful things about themselves. So you can attest to this yourself. It doesn't really work. And sometimes that praise stuff, not only doesn't it work, it can actually backfire because it can give kids so many accidental and unhelpful messages, like that they should really be thinking about what other people think and seeking praise. And that's how that they should be measuring themselves. Or that if they make mistakes and they don't receive praise, it might mean something negative about themselves. Or when they don't feel good, they should look outside themselves to make themselves feel better. Or that when you want attention or you want, to lift yourself up or buoy yourself up, put yourself down. Or like when I was in high school, it was like a thing in my friend group that it was always like insult actually to talk about somebody like fishing for compliments. These are behaviors that are really understandable that even just we could be accidentally teaching our kids. So let's back up even further. Like, let's be really clear. Like in the very beginning of a kid's life, it's natural for them to believe that we are the source of their self-esteem. First of all, we're the source of everything else in their life, their food, their day, their minute to minute. We are the source. But guess what? It's actually true in the beginning and throughout their childhood that we are their source of self-esteem, but it's not in the way that you would think. It's not because we're praising them and complimenting them and kvelling about them all the time. It's our way of being with our kids that is the seed of their self-concept. And it doesn't come from that praise and positivity. It comes because we're connected to them and they have a sense of safety with us. So when we go down this route of praise, 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 we might be trying to help our kids with their self-concept, but we're really sort of missing the mark. When kids feel connected, when they feel loved, when they feel valued, when they feel understood and seen, when they feel like that we care about them and for them, and they have that sense of safety that they can be whoever they are around us, and we will delight in them. There's a difference between delighting in a child and praising a child. And that's kind of what I want to suss out in the rest of this episode. So let's talk about, where do self-esteem, confidence, and behavior improvement, by the way, come from if it's not coming from us, praising them constantly. The first place that sense of self-concept, that sense of safety and okayness in the world comes from is their attachment to us. A healthy parent-child attachment. That's the number one most important thing on the planet. So when we do work on ourselves as parents so that we are neutral and non-attached to kids' behavior and non-attached to their accomplishments, we can just be with them in true connection. And that is 10 times more valuable than actually being non-neutral and super attached to their behavior and accomplishments and going overboard with praise when they're doing well and getting upset when they're not. Just being consistently in love with your child, regardless of their behavior and accomplishments, 10 times more powerful. So can you be madly in love with your child and demonstrate that you're madly in love with them? Not through your words necessarily, not through praise, but just through your way of being, through your energy. Can you do that? It's a tall order, even though it's so simple. It's a simple thing that requires us to do lots and lots of our own growth and development and self-actualization and all those fun words that you hear me talk about every week on the podcast. And maybe you already have like Confessions of a Parent Coach bingo cards that you get to give yourself some points because I just said self-actualization. So that's the big number one thing that self-esteem and confidence come from. Number two, struggling and I'm going to say suffering, hardship, duress. More important for kids than their parents thinking they're wonderful is their parents seeing them as capable, that they can solve a problem. They have what it takes. When we hand our kids problems back to them with lots of love and confidence, and we let them fail and we let them, experience what happens when they make the different choices that they make, and even the choices we think might be good or the ones that we think might be bad. And no matter what, we receive them with lots of love and belief when they fail, when they succeed. The whole point is that that's their failure, that's their success. They got to do it and they got to struggle, and we never stop believing in them that whole time. So we get back to almost something that I talked about a few weeks ago, which is that necessary aspect of authoritative parenting, which is discipline, actually helps with kids' self-confidence, because they do get to persevere through a hard thing and experience a hard thing without us ever needing to rescue them, and knowing that they're safe and all that great stuff. Number three thing that helps with kids' self-esteem and confidence and self-concept and sense of okayness and all of that stuff, being seen and understood. Instead of evaluating them when we say, oh, that was good, that was bad, I'm proud of you for this, I'm disappointed in you for, if we're not evaluating them or their work or their accomplishments, we just observe them and know them. That is so much more powerful. Instead of saying, oh my gosh, that painting is beautiful, it can be saying, I noticed that you're painting a lot lately. Oh my gosh. Now, the peek behind the curtain, I do have some rough notes for this podcast episode, and I misread them and said lady instead of lately. So instead of saying that is the most beautiful painting I've ever seen on the planet, we can say, you've been painting a lot lately, or it seems like you're interested in painting. You can see how I'm putting this away from my opinion and more onto facilitating this child's awareness of themselves, because helping them feel seen helps them to feel that they are something to see. It helps them become known to themselves, not just to us. So instead of saying, I'm proud of you, you can say, I can see that you're really proud of yourself. When I am pretty good at this. When my kid comes home from martial arts and says, Mom, I watched this, I learned this thing in martial arts today, I can say, like, wow, it seems like you're really proud of yourself, or how did it feel to learn that? Or, you seem pretty excited to show that to me. It's all about how this kiddo is feeling about himself and what things make him feel the way that he feels right now. I'm facilitating my son's self-awareness and knowing and understanding himself, which is so much more important than him having a heightened awareness of how I feel about him. And then that segues me into the fourth thing that I like to point out that helps with kids' self-concept, which is self-discovery. When we ask questions, we help them discover how they feel about themselves and support their growth away from being preoccupied with how others feel about them. So when your kiddo says, did you see me do that? Or watch me, aren't you proud of me? Didn't I do a good job? We can put that question right back to them. You could say, yeah, I did notice that. How do you feel about the thing that you just did? How does it feel to, do that thing in martial arts, or be able to do a flip on the trampoline, or whatever it is, right? So you can see that all of this stuff that we're talking about, it shifts the focus away from like, how do we feel about our kids? Even that very first thing that I said, which is doing our work so that we can be neutral and non-attached. Doing our work helps us hold a container for a child that is about the child, and it truly is for that child. It is helping them to go from the natural state that they are in when they are babies, which is completely and 100% dependent on us for everything, including understanding who they are and if they're good or bad, or where they belong in the world, or, literally defining themselves. That, of course, in the very beginning, it comes from us. I mean, if a child's being raised by its birth mother, that child's parent literally made that child. That child used to be a part of that parent. So it makes perfect sense that in the beginning, we are everything to our kids. We are their self-esteem. So it is very important to not be putting your kid down, of course, but it is part of a child's natural growth process to develop their own sense of self and their own awareness of their likes and their dislikes, their opinions and their ways that they see themselves and the things that they feel proud of, and all of those things. So always helping this child connect the dots between the emotion that they're feeling right now and what that means to them about them, instead of always seeking to be approved of by other people, pleasing to other people. A lot of the stuff that we all as adults struggle with now, it's not going to preclude your child from going through the natural course of a human development that is the arc of a human life. Of course, all of our kids are still going to struggle with self-doubt. They're going to struggle with negative self-talk. These are parts of being a human. But just imagine if we had been given this sort of container growing up, how maybe further along we might be in our sort of relationship with our self-concept or self-esteem or negative or positive self-talk, or, what new ideas might we have already at this point in our lives. That is the gift that we can give our kids by parenting them this way. So I would say definitely give yourself permission to move away from purely praising and complimenting your child, because your child will continue to look to you to know how to feel about themselves and their accomplishments, and shift toward facilitating your child's self-exploration, self-discovery of how they feel about themselves, how they feel about their accomplishments in and of themselves, separate from us. That's part of this natural process of individuation that our kids are going through. And we get to facilitate that instead of sort of like hobbling them along the way, if that makes sense. So, this kind of stuff is the stuff that my clients learn when they work with me. And I think that this episode in and of itself is such a great example of sort of the straddling that the work I do does between these areas of like psychology and personal growth and all of that stuff with tangible, actual boots on the ground parenting skills. This stuff that we're talking about today about praise and compliments. It's firmly rooted in this like greater vision of our own self-actualization and the facilitation of our children's, blossoming in that, in that concept. And yet it's a really concrete thing. Let's try talking this way instead of talking that way to our children. This is what it's like to work with me, and specifically around this topic, it means learning to be the impetus for positive self-concept and behavior in your kid in this totally different, I would say, more conscious way. And so if that's appealing to you, if that's the kind of parent that you want to be, and you don't want to figure out how to be that parent all by yourself, you and I should be talking. I would love to set up a consultation with you and just hear where you're at, what your hopes and dreams are for your parenting, and how to make that a reality for your family. And I can definitely say I'm in a really beautiful moment in my personal life as a parent because my children are older. I've got a 21-year-old now, and getting to see the fruits of my labor, like all of this intention, all of these maybe rigid rules in the beginning when I was a younger parent that I brought to my parenting, they are paying off. And I can also see the places where I, missed the mark. That's also a true thing that exists in my life for sure. But I do feel confident in sitting here week after week, recording this podcast for you and being able to say, like, this stuff really works. Like, the humans that my kids have always been and are showing themselves to be more and more as they mature and become adults. I mean, they're just tremendous people. And obviously that's who they were all along. I didn't make them those people, but I do feel that I facilitated them like actualizing that potential that is inside them. And it's a really, really beautiful thing. It's incredibly rewarding, and this stuff really works. So I hope I see your name pop up on my calendar, and that I get to hear from you and talk with you and listen to your story instead of you just listening to mine. And I'll talk to you all again next week. Bye, everybody. The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/KaplanCall, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.